Alright guys, so I wanted to start off this video and take you through every single part that I've had to go through with my Mercedes C-Class to get it to the stage it's at. So you guys know I revived this vehicle. If you go through the Benz Revival Series, you'll see everything that I have done with this vehicle to get it to the point it is right now. But initially when we started out, these were the things I had to go through. The first thing was the fuel pump. When you let a vehicle sit, the fuel pump had died. You could tell that because when you turn the key in the ignition, the first sound that you hear, that whining sound, is actually a functioning fuel pump. So if you don't hear that in a vehicle, you know that fuel pump is not functioning. So I had to replace the fuel filter and the fuel pump. Once we finally got that done, there was a lot of diagnostics to go through with the computer just to make sure the engine was functioning the way that it should. Of course, new spark plugs were necessary and a new battery was necessary. So those are the initial aspects. Now, what I would like you to consider is a known common issue with this 202 is the MAF sensor, the mass airflow sensor. These tend to go bad, especially if you go 10 years, 15 years. And so what will happen, it'll stop regulating the flow of air properly to the engine. And that can be quite destructive if you let that go on for a period of time. So the MAF sensor, now symptoms of a bad MAF sensor are things like you might have a bit of a rough idle. You might not have any power. Maybe when you hit the accelerator, you know the response is not immediate. You're having a bit of weird things going on with the engine, and that could point to a MAF sensor. Before you go digging into the engine, replace that MAF sensor. It might save you a lot of trouble. So I replaced that MAF sensor, and then I got into a bunch of things on the underneath of this vehicle. I needed lower ball joints. We needed the drag link. I replaced the stabilizer bushings, just to make everything a bit more firm. It was feeling a bit like it had a bit of play. And with the amount of time that this vehicle has been around, this is a 1996, I thought, why not go ahead and get some of these items replaced so it can give me some worry-free motoring for some time longer. So camber links as well, and the lower control arms, I got those replaced as well. Initially these side lamps were bad, so I got the side lamps done as well on both sides. They were basically broken. The headlight is glass, but the side lamp, you have to get a plastic piece to replace that. And then, of course, you guys know there was an event. If you watch the full Benz Revival series, you'll know that there was one point I was coming out of my garage, from my mechanic's garage, and the clutch pedal just disappeared on me, went straight inside. Now, when that happens, you either have a bad brake master cylinder or the slave cylinder. So obviously, that was the issue I had. So I had to replace the master cylinder for the brake and the slave cylinder. They're not particularly expensive components, and when they go that long, you should replace them because they're bound to go. My clutch is still the original clutch. We are just about 140,000 kilometers on this vehicle. My clutch is still the original clutch, and I think it can still go some time longer. My horn on this vehicle has died on me multiple times, so I've had to replace that. Window switches, windows, regulators, all that, touch wood, is still the original parts and still working just fine. Another thing that went was the fan temperature switch. So if you've watched some of the other videos on this Benz, you know that when I would start the vehicle, the big fan in the front would start up and it would not regulate. It didn't have different modes. It was just going on full blast. So the engine sounded absolutely horrible because of that loud sound. So I needed a temperature switch for the fan, and once I got that switched out, that issue was solved. I had a few issues with my speedometers. Electrical issues are very much known on these vehicles. So dead speedometers, things acting a bit weird. My AC blower had an issue. My AC regulator had an issue. Because what happens is, and this is another advice I would give you guys, is clean the drains. I have a vehicle in the Benz. I have a video in the Benz Revival series taking you through how to clear the drains on a Mercedes, and you should do that because when you don't, and when some dirt and grime builds up, it blocks the drains, and so the water level, with heavy rains, the water level can rise, pour into your AC motor and regulator, and basically burn them. So AC regulators and motors you're going to have to look at. Speedometers are to do with wiring. You need to just make sure your wiring is done okay. If any wires are coming undone, make sure you cover them with some insulation tape, and everything will be alright. Everything is now functioning on this vehicle. I do have an ABS light, and I've run a computer on it, so I know that ABS light is pointing to a brake switch. So once I get the brake switch, that should sort out that issue. Apart from that, if I just think I've replaced some of the leather, you know, the leather gaiter for the gear knob, I assume you're going to have to replace that because it wears out after 25 years or so, and so that had to be done. But apart from that, everything else has been functioning just fine. Not had to dive very deep into that. Of course, I got the air filter replaced. I've put in a new oil filter as well. I put in some Mobil 10 W40 in this vehicle, and that engine is now running really well. So that is the full list of things I had to tackle with this particular vehicle. There were other small niggles and issues, like the back plate in some of my wheels was bent. I had a bit of brake pad screeching, and a few of those other small issues that built up as the vehicle has aged. And also a bit of rubber seal issues on my windscreen where water was coming in, so I just got the windscreen replaced as well. So that was another part that you might have to consider if you're having some water ingress. It's normal on these vehicles. It does happen. Rubber seals age, they're gonna go out, so you might have to consider that as well. Apart from that, we are very much covered. The last aspect that I would touch on is the wiring harness. If you know Mercedes in the late 80s and early 90s, they were experimenting with these biodegradable wiring harnesses, and that was because it was a government regulation that the engine wiring harness had to biodegrade over a long period of time. But Mercedes screwed that up, and theirs started biodegrading, you know, much sooner, just 15 years or 20 years later. Actually much sooner than that as well. A lot of owners were complaining about that. Now, they never issued an official recall on that. They just brushed it off. But it is something you should check out if you're purchasing one of these vehicles. If you're purchasing a W124, W126, W202, W210, all of them from this era, some of them would have that biodegradable wiring harness, which you should be careful of. You need to get that replaced, otherwise it can cause a whole host of issues, from rough idling, bad engine performance, bad fuel economy, a whole host of bad issues. So definitely, if you're purchasing used, check out that wiring harness. But apart from that, that's the full list. Common issues you should consider with one of these vehicles. You know, this is a vehicle that you can go for some worry-free motoring. You know, you can have a good time, take it out. It's relatively cheap on maintenance, and you know, it's a reliable vehicle, and it's lasted a long time. So I would definitely recommend it. And you know, it offers a sense of class that some vehicles, even modern vehicles these days, don't offer. And even the comfort, the suspension setup. This vehicle does very well on on Kenyan roads, and Kenyan roads are not that smooth. So it's become quite a desirable vehicle here in Kenya. A lot of them are there for sale, for, used pieces, used examples. And so that is the lowdown on the W202. So I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been another episode of MGC Benz Revival. Got plenty of wind here today, but you know, I hope you guys have enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. It's been Masai Gaines checking out.